All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of The Strength Classroom. I'm continuing with this series where I find other fitness pages, other fitness coaches, interview them. Maybe it's some people that you know of, maybe it's some people that you don't. The whole focus is to get like-minded people together and create some good discussions. So today I have Justin. Sorry, I can't pronounce your last name from
It's all
Instagram.
good.
It's a strength coach that I came around, I want to say maybe 1 to 2 months ago, or maybe time is escaping me, but fairly recent that I came across his Instagram page. As you can see by his shirt, he does a lot of conjugate style training for himself and maybe his clients. We'll get into some of those questions as well. So, Justin, how are you doing today?
Good, man. I appreciate you having me on. This is a neat opportunity, so thank you.
They're always a good time. So, just to let the viewers, just I'll let you take the floor. Like, what would you say is your claim to fame? What makes you stand out? Like when your clients maybe have to describe you to someone else, what would the first thing that comes out of their mouth?
Um, for me, uh, my bread and butter is writing program, and I love that stuff. Like I'm just constantly trying to learn as much as possible within the system that I love to use, but then the other systems that are kind of outside of that. But for my, I guess if you could call it like niche audience, one thing that I would hope that they would say is that I try to like over deliver when it comes to um, like things like communication. I have a bit of a background in interpersonal communication and skills and that kind of stuff. So it's always benefited me. And first of all, anytime someone pays you for something, like to me, it's just mind blowing. I mean, like I'm sure when you started writing all your own stuff, you're like, man, like people are gonna purchase things, and like this is so cool. And not that like I don't think that what I have is a great product, but it's kind of eye opening after you've been in the corporate world for a while, and so I would definitely say just my ability to kind of go above and beyond. Like I don't communicate via app. It's all to my phone. So every one of my, 70 to 80 people, they have my number. If they need something, I'm fixing it on the spot. As you know, auto regulation is critical for this system roundabout. So if I have somebody that reaches out to me, um, and says like, "Hey, I'm feeling kind of, having an issue here or having an issue there," I'm going to jump in and fix it right then and there. So I'm not going to wait. And I think with a lot of what you see on like a lot of the coaching on social media, that's a lot of what people get, and they get a really bad experience from that. And I also come from like a service background, and so I've been taught and implemented some of my own standard operating procedures when it comes to customer service, and I've brought that over from where I came from, like in the nutrition world, into online coaching, and it's done me a lot of favors.
Yeah, that's
So,
a good point because I think when people, first of all, it's like everyone is a coach now practically.
hmm
So it's just so oversaturated that how could anyone choose a coach at this point? It's like people just, it's normally just the eye test, and then you're not really getting what you just described. You're probably getting a program that's been written for 75 to 100 other people, just copy and paste. They change your name, couple of the weights or whatever, and it's very I don't like just automated, like you said, but it's almost
yeah,
like it's like a mill. They're just pumping out programs, and you're not really getting that like personal, like you said, like they have your phone number, maybe on a chat app or whatever, and they can talk to you right away, which is definitely something that I think people would appreciate. Because if you are just paying the program, you get the 9 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is, and then you're on your own. It's like, what? You could get ChatGPT to write you something better
yes,
than that. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yeah,
So the actual, I feel like the actual coach part of the coaching is kind of lost on some people that are writing programs. They're just putting
yeah.
numbers onto Excel.
I think that yes, and I think and if you follow Joe DeFranco at all, you at
Yep.
least know who he is. He one thing that always stood out to me that he said in regards to social media, because he's kind of getting older and grumpy, but one thing that he says that's 100% true is that 90% of what you see on there in terms of like what you and I do is trash. And 10% is good. You have to sift through the
Yes.
garbage to find, and unfortunately most people don't know what to look for.
Mhm.
You and I know, like
Yeah.
if I see something that I'm like, oh, I'm going to follow that person, because you just never know what you're going to like. There's a ton of good free information on social media, but unfortunately most of it is just super trash.
Yeah.
And when it all boils down to it, like the everyday person that does CrossFit, or they're super beat up, or they want to lose weight or whatever, like they don't know what to look for. So they grab the first thing that grabs their eye, like, oh, that chick looks fit, like I'd like to look like her. It's like
Yeah.
different strokes for different folks. Like, you're not gonna, her body is hers, you're not gonna be able to have that. Like, it's just, you don't know what background they have, so on and so forth. So I just I again, like, I'm blessed because I was able to kind of grow to where I am now in a very short time, like 3 years, that I've like was officially just online, just working from home. And I worked for a nutrition supplement company called Five Star Nutrition, based out of
Okay.
Texas. And I was a district manager, so I just had this huge network of people. And because I taught my teams to give like this outstanding service, like I made so many friends, like thousands of people. And I've just been super lucky that because I had that network, I was able to get people involved, especially the people that I had interacted with. They knew what I was about, but then they also saw how I trained, and they were interested in kind of like that way of training. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of training, I see your personal workouts are very conjugate inspired. We've spoke about this. Is that something you carry over to clients as well?
Yes. If you look at probably more concurrent for 70% maybe.
Okay.
Because at the top, if conjugate's just sitting up here, and really conjugate is just taking bits and pieces of all other things,
Yes.
and then following the steps that have been laid out by those before us, obviously. But I'll typically will use that same kind of like rotation with a 3 week wave. Not everybody is going to need specific like dynamic effort. Not everybody's going to need specific max effort, but there is going to be a specific effort that we're going to hit kind of throughout the week. And then what I end up doing is for that 70%, which is like your general pop mom that wants to get really fit. Some of those moms have CrossFit backgrounds,
Okay.
and so they come to me just like destroyed, like their bodies
Hmm.
are just they've had it. They're in their 40s, upper 30s,
Yeah.
even some in their 50s, and they're just wrecked. And so I use more of um, a traditional conjugate template with them, because CrossFitters tend to gravitate to that higher intensity stuff. So I know I can control that intensity and fix their weaknesses, and it's going to be like perfect. Whereas with the Gen Pop, I'll gravitate in two ways, and I'll always take it through phases. So like, this time of year where it's still cold, from like November to now, we're focusing mainly on like building muscle and getting stronger. They may not view it, and see it that way, the writing on the wall, but I'll change the reps and different things that we're doing based on the time of the year with what that person needs. But usually I'm taking most people through like hypertrophy unless they want something a little bit different. And then as we get closer to summer, that may kind of, it's always going to be there, right? Like with conjugate, it's always there. We're never getting away from the specialties, but at the same time, maybe more conditioning is going to be the effort towards closer to summer as people are wanting to get leaner, whatever.
Yeah.
But I make sure to keep those really special things in there. So what we know now with women that are, perimenopausal or in menopause is based on their lack of estrogen. Their stimulus for muscle building is much lower for anabolism. So they have to almost train in that 4 to 6 rep range. So, and it has to be, probably 2 to 3 reps shy of failure, somewhere in there. That's usually where I put it, because we know that's enough now for most people, not to kill them, but to get the stimulus. And so they're doing pseudo max effort work. I just allow them to kind of build up and make sure that there's 2 really hard sets in there on that first compound movement. Obviously, that's going to be within what they're capable of doing. If I get Sally Joe down the street that's never touched a weight, we're going to start off. It's still going to be conjugate. It's just going to be a little less complicated because I need to build their base of GPP first.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
then I can kind of bring them up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Even when you're talking about how the pieces are always there, I speak about this in like the opening paragraph of one of my books, where it's like, if you think of a pie chart and you want to think of like hypertrophy, conditioning, strength,
Mm-hmm.
all 1/3, but then throughout the year, those pieces are either going to get bigger or smaller based on what you're focusing on. But it's not like where you're doing linear periodization where you're completely eliminating one of them. So it's like you said, that's my approach. It's very similar to where you start focusing on
Yeah.
certain areas, but they're all 3 of those are going to be there depending on
The
what the
the
client
more
needs.
the more I talk to people, that I try to surround myself with, the people that I watch and really kind of gravitate towards. I try to surround myself with people that are just more advanced than I am in terms of
Yep.
like my understanding of this system, but then also like other systems, because I do think, and I notice you do this too, is like it doesn't always have to be one way or another. Like you're going to implement different things.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't super high on like Cal Dietz's like eccentric, isometric, concentric, but every now and again, like it's good to mix in a little bit of that eccentric work. Even Louis Simmons said that like there is a place for it. It just depends. If you're a weight class athlete, probably not, but there's a place for it. And so sometimes, depending on how my body feels personally, I'm going to mix that in.
Yeah.
Now with the GP, heck yeah, I use eccentrics because that's going to give them the fastest ability to gain muscle, because they're really doubling down on the lowering portion of whatever compound movement or unilateral or single
Yeah.
joint movement that they're doing. But it always comes back to, I'm still going to say, let's just say, because I don't like to do for the Gen Pop. I won't do like super like one or a double or 2 with slow eccentrics. It'll be like a 4 or a 6.
Okay.
But it's still a max effort.
Yeah.
So it technically it's not super maximal, right? You're not overloading, but it's still really hard. It's still max effort. They're still required to fire and recruit a massive amount of motor units within 4 to 5 reps. Which I guess that kind of falls under like brief maximal tension. But again, because they're having to lower it slowly, they can't use as much weight.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping them safer. At the same time, I'm able to still have them fire as many fast twitch, or recruit as many fast twitch fibers at in that moment.
Yeah, that's one thing I like doing even for myself. Whereas every week I will have a max effort workout, but like you can't just always do a heavy single or a heavy double.
Right.
Eventually something has to give. So what I like doing, maybe if it is a heavy single, it'll be a variation that's much harder. Like instead of like, let's say a deadlift off the floor, it'll be like a snatch grip deficit deadlift. And that's going to lower the amount of weight that I have to do extremely. Or like you just said, I'll work up to a 5 rep max or something like that. And that's also going to lower the weight. So playing around with those variables, like you mentioned, auto regulation is really key, even for myself and other people. I remember the very first program I wrote, someone said like, how is this max effort if I'm doing a heavy 5? And I'm like, well, just give it time. Like every
Yeah,
week can't be max effort unless you're blasting like crazy and just
yeah,
doing what they do at Westside essentially, where it's just the environment is like literally wills you into doing these one rep maxes. And
yeah.
that kind of leads into my next question. What do you think the biggest misconception amongst maybe the curious people who want to try conjugate? What do you think their biggest misconception with the whole
There's a
method is?
there's a lot because
Yeah.
everything that you just said like compiles that. But I would say where a lot of people miss with that system is like what from what I see, it's like first of all, accommodating resistance. Like everyone's gonna say like, oh, the bands and the chains. Okay, let's use me. I'm 42. Okay, so and I have I played pro football, I played college football, so my background is in sports. Like I want to be. I'm still trying to get stronger. I'm chasing a 500 bench. Like that's my lifetime goal. You're not going to tell me that I can't do it because I'm 42. Like I'm 50 pounds away. Like I'm going to get there. But for me, wear and tear is a thing eventually, right? You can't just continuously do the
Yeah.
singles all the time and expect that even if you read the text from Louis, every fourth week he has somebody doing a 6 rep max
Yeah.
or he has somebody doing max effort with dumbbells.
Dumbbells. Yeah. I
When
was just
people
going to say
see
that.
that, they see that and they think like they don't even recognize it. Oh, he just throwing. No, he's not just throwing it in there because typically on that third or fourth week, the older guys probably have to deload a little bit.
Yeah.
And so even though you're still getting that brain stimulation of, oh, I'm excited. I get to do a 6 rep max on ultra wide grip. You're excited about that because it's still a max, but he knows and I know and you know that 6 rep max isn't going to be as taxing on your system with certain lifts. Probably good mornings it would be awful, but like anything else like a wide grip bench or a dumbbell bench, it's not going to be as taxing, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at bands and chains, for me, I will cycle those, and very rarely will I do just something with straight weight unless it's like a board press or a pin press or a rack lockout. For me, the benefit, there's so many benefits to the unloading and loading and stretch reflex and all that stuff and the overspeed eccentrics, but the biggest benefit that I notice is that it allows you to kind of avoid the arterial wear and tear on your joints because you're just not able to. It's hardest where you're your strongest, so you're getting saved there, and down here where you're weakest, it's not as bad. So just for a bench, for an example, so like I'm not going to be able to use as much weight, but I'm still getting maximal stimulation for my central nervous system, right? So I'm still going to recruit a ton of those high threshold motor units, but I'm not going to run into the issue of if I'm just doing straight weight, that's like abusive. I think we talked about this at one point, messaging back and forth about like brief maximal tension. It's the paragraph in super training is about this big. It's not big at all. It's maybe like half a page where they talk about brief maximal tension. And I didn't become like intimately aware of it until I talked to Jared Bidney of Explosive Mechanics down in Georgia. He does like sick things with athletes, and he mentioned it. So I started looking, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to try the 5s, the 4s, the 3s, the 2s. And he kind of gave me a little bit of like, he's like, just try it this way for 3 weeks and see what happens. And I got to where, I would do 6 or 7 with 365 on bench, and then you go up to 385 and you try to get 4 to 5, but you're really just trying to beat what you did last week because really it's the last couple of reps that are causing you to strain. That's what you're after, is the strain. And when I finished that fourth week, I was able to triple 405, which I had never done before.
Okay.
But I was wrecked. So I almost had to do like I had to do a pretty light deload. And then, for about another week, I still could see like I wasn't fully recovered from that phase yet. So again, that's something you can cycle in, but you have to pay attention to how is this impacting my body? Because if I'm not getting super compensation after the transformation phase, then what's the point? I'm just
Yeah.
constantly beating myself down. I'm not building it back up. So you have to be careful. And young kids don't have to worry about that. That's why it works so good for them. But 30s, 40s, and beyond,
Yeah.
it still works, but you just have to pay close attention to what's going on. And as I've gone back into the books, because I always go back to the books and I'll find something else that just speaks to me more and more every time. As I've gone back to the books and gone more kind of closely followed the West Side template, I'm able to now further see the writing on the wall in terms of like, would I have a list of all the things that help me the most, and I can come back to those and make sure that my accessories are driving those lifts up.
Yeah.
That's where I think, besides the accommodating resistance, where a lot of people get screwed up, is they just think it's completely random, right? And it is, from the outside person looking in that doesn't understand the system, but the randomness of it just looks that way because you're doing something different every single week. Whereas for you and I, you're keeping track of these particular things. Like for me, two board with chains is a good indicator. Close grip is a great indicator. If I'm hitting a certain amount on close grip, that is like a 10% lower than where my single is going to be on a traditional grip bench press. So if my close grip is going up, I know my bench press is going up.
Yeah.
But then, like Louis Simmons says, well, how the heck do you drive up your close grip? And that's where you look at all the things that you can do. Floor press is another one. Like
Yeah.
I'm always going to come back to that with 3 or 4 different variations of it. And then I know if I can track one of those up, then I can start to kind of plant other things in and then continue to move up. It's a slow trend, but as long as the trend is up, you're doing good. The other one is probably people don't do the conditioning, so their GPP sucks.
Yeah.
They don't push the accessories enough. Okay, that's something that I've learned. I always knew, right? Like it's that you have to that all the people that are in that community, it's the accessories, 20% classical, 80% supplementals, but you don't really understand what that means until you actually try something like the repeated effort method to near failure. Okay. I didn't catch that in the book until this last time that I read it. And so I always have understood about, yes, you need to be like guys like me, like 1 to 2 reps shy of failure on your accessory work. But people talk about like junk volume, and it's like, what are your build-up sets? Okay, so the way that I have gone and looked and interpreted is, what I need to start doing is I'm going to pick a weight, and the rep range doesn't really matter depending on like where I want to fall with that, what I'm trying to fix. Like whether, let's just say it's upper back, right? I'm doing some sort of chest supported row. I'm going to pick a weight that's already pretty hard. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to take that 1 to 2 reps shy of failure. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 10 to 15 to 20 pounds, and I'm going to take that close to failure. And I'm going to do that for however many sets that I need to do that to get the work in. And after listening to and reading some of the things that Louis wrote about, he mentioned that if you do the same thing, like say you get 15 reps with that weight, if you don't go up, the stimulation is nowhere near as good. So even though you got less reps, you went up in weight. So you're still getting that stimulation every single set.
Yeah, it's one of the variables that change.
Yes. So in doing that, and again, I'm speaking like for me and what I've seen with my clients, because I've implemented it with them too, is that it has definitely worked. And if you're tracking and looking at how much weight you're doing, when you come back to that thing, you're stronger and you can add more weight. It's not always about like I have to count and say like this is 4 sets of 6. So what I'll tell people to do is I want you to, because I know roundabout how strong people are through the app, through my app. I can see what their records are. I want you to grab, let's just say it's a female. I want you to grab 30-pound dumbbells. You're going to do max reps. And then I want you to grab the 35s, and then you're going to do max reps. And then I want you to grab the 40s. You're going to do max reps. And you can see it's 10, 6, 4. Each one of those sets, they're getting stimulation. Then the next week when they come back to it, oh my God, they got more reps. They got more reps. And then at the third week, I'll rotate that out. I think other than like the GPP and the sled work, that's a big thing that people really miss on. Now, granted, not everything is going to be to failure. Some things you need to do just moderate reps on. You can't do everything to failure because you're going to just wreck yourself. So people have to kind of take that into consideration. You have to know, like, if I'm going to do face pulls, I can do 30 reps on that because the back is a more of a slower twitch, like in between twitch muscle fibers, and there's a lot of them. So you can really hit that hard with more reps, get a lot of blood flow in there, versus your triceps is type 2, low reps, low frequency. So you want to kind of hit that harder, especially if you're trying to drive your bench up. So same thing with like the hamstrings. The hamstrings are the triceps of the lower body, because they drive everything up. So those would probably be the three things that I've noticed the most.
Okay. In regards to what you just said about pushing the accessories, so I might have missed it, but you said like your first set, like the workup set, you would already take that somewhere close to failure?
Yeah, pretty near, but it's not going to see like if you've been training for a long time, so you know if let's say you want to do a barbell row, okay, you know, okay, I'm going to put 225 on there. I know I'm good for at least 10. Okay, so maybe I do 8, and then that's like pretty starting to the form's starting to break down a little bit, but I could squeak out 2 more. Then I'm gonna add weight to that.
Okay.
I'm gonna go up, and I'm gonna get as many as I can because you're already there. I think what a lot of people do is they start so low. If I tell you, hey, I want you to do 5 sets of 8 on lat pull downs, you're going to start that first set probably like, up here so that I'm saving. You don't want to save.
Yeah.
You just want to give. You see what I'm saying? And so again, I'm speaking to what I've seen with myself, but then how that's important with clients that don't really understand how to push based on just a given variable of 4 sets of 12 versus if I give them a weight that I know that they can get close to 12 or maybe even 15, and then say, I want you to do max reps. In their mind, they're like, okay, well, and keep this in mind, like I'm not telling them to do that with squats or deadlifts, right?
Of
Like
course.
compound movements,
Different story.
that's completely different. But when it comes to like single joint movements, it's going to be more about like I need them to know that they're getting as much out of that set as possible. And there's few ways you can say, oh, we're going to do 2 RIR, 2 reps in reserve, or we're going to do an 8 on RPE, rate of perceived exertion. But if I tell you do max reps, you don't have a choice. It's like my brain goes, I got to go all out here. See what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
because even those like self-monitoring scales such as RIR and RPE, they're so subjective
They
that
are.
I remember I read, I'm not too big into reading like PubMed studies or whatever, but there was one that someone made a video about, and I thought it was fairly interesting, where they got a group of individuals, I can't remember how many, and I think it was bicep curls and tricep extensions, so like single joint stuff. And it was like they asked them to get a weight that they would typically do 10 reps with. And then they asked them to go to actual failure. And the average amount of reps someone got was 17. That's the average. That's not even like the highest. So that's 7
Mm-hmm.
more reps than someone would do with 10. So, like you just said, if you tell someone to go do 4 sets of 12, it's probably going to be 4 easy sets of 12. And maybe the fourth set might be challenging just because they've fatigued themselves with the other 3 sets. But I think people will get more out of what you just said because it was 4 sets of 12 and you were kind of just going through the motions. You're like pre-fatiguing yourself for that one set at the end, which if you had just taken the first couple closer to failure, you're probably getting more out of that. So that's even what sometimes people say they'll do like 5 sets of 8 on bench. And already in my head, I say to myself, like, well, 3 of those didn't matter. Because if you're
Exactly.
doing 5 sets of 8 and they're all the same weight, all the same reps, then some of those sets were a waste of time.
Right. And so, okay, so there's a huge one is time. Okay. So even if you listen to Louis talk and in the books, it's like you don't need to be in there for more than 60 minutes.
Hmm.
And if I'm giving somebody 5 sets of 8 reps compared to 3 sets of max reps with X amount of rest, that's another thing too, is you can really push the GPP up with just like minimizing the amount of rest that you're doing, because you're not trying to come back and hit that same amount of reps. You're actually just trying to go up in weight and hit as many reps as you can,
Yeah.
which will force you to also go, your GPP will go up and you get stronger that way. Your strength endurance gets better, right? So when you're looking at it, like that 3 sets of max reps is just going to be so much more effective, especially on single joint stuff, because they know that I have to go hard for 3 sets versus 5 sets of 8. Like if you're looking at the law of averages, like 90% of people aren't going to understand what that means. They're just gonna do it, and they're not going to get any kind of stimulation. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, not only with the system, but just in general, is the what it actually is like to take a single joint movement to failure on a reverse hyper. Good God. Like that's like awful. You can't breathe.
Yeah.
Everything is like getting tight. You feel like you want to throw up. But if you put, 3 or 4 45s on each side and you go for 50 reps and you're doing it the right way, right? Not like super swing, but just enough where, you're controlling it, then you're going to be blown up from that. Like it
Yeah.
may only take, 2 sets. So,
Yeah, that it's funny. I just got my reverse hyper in, I want to say it was September or October. I didn't really sure I use it for myself, but my wife had some accident and her back's been kind of weak as hell ever
mhm.
since. And so like to the point where it's hard for her to do a good morning, hard for her to do even a
Yeah,
hyperextension. Whereas I said, well, if you could just try this, you can put literally 5 pounds on it and you're still working through the motion. And within like 3 weeks, it's kind of, she's like, I could actually feel my back getting stronger. But, and then I had a couple of clients use it. But the first thing I always tell them, I'll show them a video of someone swinging it. And I go,
right.
don't do this. Always make sure there's a little bit. I always tell people there's a little bit of like tension between like the apparatus on you, because mine's like the belt one, not the one where your feet can lock in. So I
Yeah,
always like to feel tension around that. And I just say a good rule of thumb is if your first rep, you can't get it high enough, like if you have to do these little pre-swings to
yeah,
finally get it moving, then that's just I guess you're stretching out your lower back and it's okay, but you're
yeah.
not really getting the most out of it that you can.
So I think the way I interpret it is like there's kind of two kind of rules of thumb with the hyper. The one is like if you're doing it to get stronger, to really strengthen the upper back or the lower back, the glutes and the hamstrings, is like it has to be a controlled
Yeah.
swing. You shouldn't see your feet in the front. And you want to get your legs out to where you're squeezing your glutes and you're almost like lifting your hips on the pad up and down. That's why
Yeah.
you see neck back, head forward. Um, and then the other rule of thumb is that if you're just looking for traction, I
Yes.
think it's probably okay to swing a little bit more, simply because you're able to kind of like open up and get more blood in the sacrum. And then Louis would always say, like, anytime someone hurts their back, there's no bruising, or because there's not any real blood flow to that area
Yes, he did. I've
because it's
seen that
mostly
exact
ligaments and
interview.
tendons. So whereas with your hamstring, you pull your hamstring, it's bruised, your quad, it's bruised,
Yes.
whatever. So the blood flow aspect of that is important. So that's why max effort days, the reps are lower, the weight's heavier, but then you're controlling the swing. And then dynamic effort days, you're really just trying to offset the volume from the reps on the deadlift and the squats or whatever. I personally just feel like it's an amazing posterior chain builder. I will say that I think a lot of women struggle from a remote standpoint. They struggle to get it right the first time. So I have to get them to really try it because they're like, screw this, I don't want to do this because it just like then they'll send me the video and I'm like, okay, put your foot on the thing, put your other foot in there, and then get up there. But it's just so uncomfortable for them. So, sometimes we have to find some different ways to do things depending on like what someone has available to them. If they don't have a hyper, maybe we're doing glute emphasis 45-degree back extension or
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah, it's
What I
similar.
mean?
Just
So
the
yeah,
I guess tension would be flipped around. Your upper body's moving as opposed to
it
your
is.
lower
Yeah.
body.
But a lot of people, what they'll get screwy is that they'll try to do a reverse hyperextension without the actual reverse hyper. And Louis has said on numerous occasions, it's just not the same because
Yeah.
there's just no weight that's coming from your legs coming up and down unless you had like ankle weights or something.
Yeah.
But that would be the only way.
Yeah. I remember I even tried something when I wanted to see if I wanted a reverse hyper, and I did something where I jacked up my flat bench and I put a dip belt around my waist with a longer than normal chain, and I kind of
Hmm.
attached it to my feet, and that gave a similar sensation. But now that I have an actual reverse hyper, I feel like nothing kind of can almost
Yeah. Yeah.
not nothing. Like it's just such a unique. Even when I was doing it with the dip belt, I realized why it feels so different is because the actual pendulum is in front of me, whereas the dip
Yeah.
belt, the weight was right behind my legs the whole time.
Yeah.
So it just feels totally different. And even just the you having to brace your abs so the pad doesn't like that's the first thing everyone, even myself, I was surprised. I just tried it out with 50 pounds and I was like, whoa, like the impact on your midsection is really something you have to get used to.
Yeah, I had one of my buddies, he has the Scout like you do,
Okay, yep.
and he's like, dude, I had him doing because I think you can only put like so much weight on there, right? Like because it's a smaller.
It all depends on the thickness of your plate. So I
Okay.
tend to I've done 200 pounds with it, and I've noticed I have my red ones are Ivanko plates and they're a little bit thicker, but then I have these York barbell plates that are really thin. And I've seen some videos online where it says not to go past, I believe it says not to go past 180 pounds, but he had 270 pounds, and he says I don't feel like it's wobbly or I don't feel like it's in danger of breaking. So I feel like
They
that's
probably
just one
have
of
like
those
those.
warranty things where they lower it.
Yeah.
But if you're using bumpers, you are no way in hell getting more than two plates on.
So that's the issue that one of my buddies was having, and so I was having him do sets of 50 because he only has bumpers, so we
Of
can't
course.
like he can only do so much. I'm like, oh, we just have to do the reps then because you're back and so on and so forth. He's around the same age as me, and he messaged me the other day and he's like, dude, how are you doing these high reps like this? I can't breathe. Like, and when you're not used to it, because he just got it, and he's like, when you're not used to that, it's tough. But I think again coming back to like where a lot of people go wrong with the system is they just don't understand the intensity that comes along with the system, but then the little tricks and the trades like that come along with it too. And yes, you could do like a very basic conjugate style program and still get really good results if you just had a barbell and you didn't have all the specialty bars. But the 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 whole point of switching the exercises is creating as many variations as you could possibly need to drive up your strengths in those areas. So for guys like us, it's like, man, we have to have a camber bar and a safety bar and a multi-grip bar and a fat bar, and because there's just I'm very when it comes to like I'm very type A, so I need a lot of variation. I switch every week. So not only max effort, but I'm doing a similar type of movement for supplemental movements as well as accessories, just different in terms of like what the movement is. So I might do a lat pull down, and then I might do a close grip lat pull down, or I might do a neutral grip lat pull down, or
Okay.
whatever, right? Like I can change it as long as it's similar to that pattern that I know is going to help affect. And then I use what works and I get rid of what doesn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that even I think feel like that goes a long way. And I don't think everyone needs to change every week, but it also goes a long way in terms of just and I know Matt Wenning, I've heard this is where I first heard the term for him, like just overuse injuries
Yeah.
in general. Like it's not to say if you do a flat bench twice a week in a row, it's like, oh my God, overuse injury, right? But it's just if there's people that are preconditioned to doing tricep pushdowns every week for 16 weeks, then that's very similar pressures on your elbow every week. Whereas if you just did that for 3 weeks and then a different tricep exercise the next 3 weeks, and it actually goes on to what you were saying before. I feel like people leave exercises in for so long because their progression is just so slow. Whereas they'll start
Yeah.
off their week one will be a weight that they easily could maybe even do double the weight on, but they just want to have this slow progression where it's like, no, just start off where it's moderate to hard at first, and then try to ramp up in 3, maybe 4 weeks to the point where you can't possibly add any more weight, and then put something else in, like you just said.
Well, and we know through science, like that fourth week, I mean, the texts tell us that, like, we know that fourth week, if it's the same exact thing, right? It's in the same reps, that might work for someone that's 15, right? But again, they're still going to hit at that fourth week. They're probably still going to hit the wall where if they don't change or go up in weight or something like that, it's just not going to work anymore. Like at some point, yes, you got to push that thing. But again, who's going to be in the game longer, right? Because shoot, plenty of people that I came up with, they don't even work out anymore, and they played football on a very high level. And it's just like, how are you able to continue to maintain such a high level of intensity and athleticism and all these different things? It's like, well, I think genetics plays a role at some point for a lot of people, but I give a lot to the system. I mean, when I started with my coach when I was in college back in, I first started in the Conjugate system probably back in like 2002 was my freshman year of college, and all the way to now, it's never changed in terms of the system. Now the things that I try, I'm always going to try different things. I'll mix in some Olympic lifts every now and again. I can't front rack on cleans because my shoulders, but I'll still try and do high pulls. Every now and again, I'll mix that in just to hit a different type of speed strength or explosive strength or whatever, and in place of like jumps or something. But it's always it's always under the dome of Conjugate.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like most of the year it's West Side Conjugate, but I'll make the changes as I feel like I need to make the changes, because if you wanted to cut and you wanted to get really lean, you're probably not going to be able to go as heavy on certain things all the time because the food isn't there.
Yeah.
So yes, you still want to try your hardest to maintain muscle and keep getting stronger and get that stimulation, but you may not be able to do as many sets or train as long because the food's not there because you're cutting. So
Yeah.
you're doing different things just based on like what your body, where you're at with your body and when you can push. Like the holidays is a great time to push. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like I tell people, it's, everyone's always worried about like my weight loss clients. They're going to be worried about, I'm going to overeat on Christmas. I'm going to overeat on Thanksgiving. I'm like, who cares? It's 2 meals a year. All
Yeah.
your other meals are good. Like, who cares? So, there's going to be snacks and things like that. Just, portion control, obviously, don't overdo it, but we have more calories in the tank right now. Why don't we just push a little bit? So again, it's just knowing where you are with things, and the layout of the system is great because you can take people through all these neat phases and they never even know it because it's always still under that dome of what you're trying to achieve, which is bring up someone's weaknesses and get them as strong and as fit as possible. Like no one will ever say, and if they do, I will be so surprised. No one would ever say, I wish I wasn't as strong. Find me
That's true.
somebody like that would say like I wish I was a little bit weaker. No. There is not a human being on earth, right, that would argue that they want to be weaker. It's like that's the dumb, so you don't want to live very long because we know strength is correlated.
Yep.
So to me, that's going to be a factor for anybody, whether they're a bodybuilder or a mom trying to lose weight. Strength is important. It's like it's the ultimate of ultimate things that you could really work on
Yeah.
is
Well,
trying to get stronger.
it's like Mark Bell's slogan, strength is never a weakness.
Yeah,
It's very,
never.
very true. I feel
Yeah,
like the only issue I would find someone could run into, or where I could say, it's when that's all you have. Like you're
right,
just strong. Like you're maybe you wouldn't be under muscle, but like your conditioning sucks. You can't even touch your toes. You can't walk up the
right.
stairs without being out of breath. But at the end of the day, there's no such thing as being too strong. There's such thing as being too strong to the other variables, but no
Yes,
one should be like, oh, like I'm not gonna train for strength anymore because it's good enough or something like that. It's one thing that
yeah,
always drove me nuts when I started jujitsu. The whole mantra there is don't use your strength, and everyone always tells me no, that's BS. Like you obviously have to be strong, but it's like don't rely on strength to carry you. Obviously, your conditioning, your cardio, your technique, obviously,
yes,
but it's like to say, because in my mind, I remember my first couple of months, it was like don't use your strength. So it's like, okay, so I don't have technique, my cardio's okay, so what am I just gonna do 20% strength and then get ragdolled that way? So it's like
yes.
strength will carry over into any realm. It's just whatever realm you decide to go into, you have to make sure you have the other qualities that are necessary for whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I think when so I can really expand on that. So I think because I did no gi for about 2 years,
Okay.
like probably 6 months before COVID, and then like I just fell in love, and then COVID happened. In Texas, I was living in Texas at the time, and
Okay.
everything kind of stayed open anyway, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And the people in the gym, they're like, if you're sick, just don't show up. Like
Yeah.
so, but
Here
then
it was the complete opposite.
yeah. Oh no, for sure. But then maybe about a year after that, I stayed with it, and I think first of all, just to kind of back up and jump into expand on like the strength part, right? I think it's where what we're saying is that if you weigh 400 and you bench 400, like you're strong, but that's like being strong for the wrong reason,
It's like being
right?
skinny with abs.
Right, right. So it's about what you can do relative to your body weight, right? So it's like how strong are you is your relative strength. Like can you do a pull up? That's great. You can do a row with 275, but can you do a pull up? Or even Louis talked about that I think around like he got frustrated around like 2014, 2015 because all those guys were fat, and they're like, no, you're fat, you're just carrying a bunch of water and body fat. Like yeah, you're strong, but what else can you do? So that's where they started implementing more of the conditioning and the kettlebells and all that kind of stuff to get guys in shape at the
Yeah.
same time because it's just not healthy to be that
Of
big.
course. Yeah.
So I think that's where the strength component is, like you got to understand what that means in terms of being relatively strong versus in terms of just being big and you're just naturally strong, but you're also fat or whatever. Now, in jujitsu, I've also heard the same thing because for me, just to give people an example, I'm 6 foot and a half and I weigh about 240, 245, depending on the day. And when I started going to roll, like this gym was a very like MMA style gym.
Okay.
Um, and one of the girls that owns it, she's actually in the UFC. Her name's
Oh,
Haley Cowan, but they're real good friends of mine. And so they're like, dude, just come roll. Like you don't have to pay or anything like that. Just come in and roll. And so I started going. And the first day, like I know things because I've studied and watched things, but I never had done it. And I have a little bit of a grappling background just from like law enforcement and then obviously athletically with football. And so my mindset was like, okay, well, when we're going to roll, like I'm going to just use whatever little Greco-Roman stuff that I know and then I'm just going to be a bull in a china shop until I can't. And of course, like I'm tapping out in 30 seconds because I don't have that specific energy
Of
system
course.
trained, right? But when the guys say like, number one, for guys like us, if we try to overuse our strength, we burn out faster. That's the
Yes.
first thing. So the second thing is that it's if strength wasn't important, there wouldn't be weight classes, right? And all of these big time guys that you're seeing that like at the high level, I can't think of the crazy guy that's super flamboyant with his hair dyed blonde. Like he's freaking jacked. He's the best guy in the entire world. Him and like Nicky Rodriguez. If strength was important or wasn't important, those guys wouldn't be as jacked and strong as they are. It is important when you come up to somebody that's equal skill as
Yes.
you, the stronger man will likely win.
Yes.
So I think when it boils down to it is they want you to achieve technical proficiency before you start to really implement all of that geared up strength and power that we
Exactly.
have that we can use. That stuff's probably most beneficial for grips and then for throws and takedowns. But when you're on the ground, it's like technical proficiency. I have to
Yeah.
know what's going where and so on and so forth. And so I think that's kind of where that whole thought process comes from. But if you go up against another white belt or another blue belt that's the same technical proficiency as you, hell yeah, you're going to use your strength and you'll dominate that person if you're stronger than them.
Yeah.
Like that's just what it is.
And then even sometimes if you're not equal, if you're within the same just realm, if your technique is close enough, but you're
Yes,
much stronger than them,
you'll
then
dominate.
that could allow you to,
Yep.
like you said, overtake it the other way. So it's just how close all the variables are. But even from a
Yeah.
football's perspective, like there's a reason why the smaller guys tend to play on the outside, the DBs, the
Right.
wide receivers, the bigger, stronger guys are
The
in the
skills. Yeah.
middle. It's just how the sport has evolved. It's just
Yep.
how. But it's funny if you look at like old football clips. I remember I can't remember what football. I think it was like Marion Motley or something like that. He was a running back and he was like 6'4", like 230 or something like that. And I was like, that's not that big of a football player, but they talked about him like he was this mountain of a man, where back then it
Yeah.
was. But
Yeah.
things evolve, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, back in the 50s, that's a tackle.
Yeah, exactly.
But like in college, I played against Brandon Jacobs, who was the
Oh,
biggest running
he was
back anybody
huge.
had ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a monster. He just ran all over everybody. And they're like, you're gonna play tight end. You're gonna play. He's like, no, I'm playing tailback, and he did good. You know what I mean? He got a couple
Yeah.
Super Bowl rings or whatever. But like, that's just not the norm anymore. Like the norm is guys are gonna be that big, and some of them are like these offensive linemen now. Like you look at Lane Johnson, like that guy's jacked.
Yeah.
Like most of those guys, they have huge arms. Some of them have abs. Like it's changing.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Brandon Jacobs. I feel like that happens a lot in youth sport where it's like I hate that because I'm an elementary school teacher and I hate when I see whoever's the basketball coach that year, it's like the tallest kid just automatically is center. It's just
Yeah,
so frustrating to me. It's like, but okay,
yeah,
he's tall, but like if he has other attributes he can bring to the team, put him somewhere on the perimeter, maybe power forward. Like he doesn't have to just be
yep,
pigeonholed into, and it's even like in Pee Wee football. I coached that for 7 years, and it's like at the low, once it gets up to the age where it's like they start hitting puberty, everyone like has their own body structure and whatnot. But like at the lowest age, it's like okay, we're just gonna put the biggest kid at running back. We'll give him the ball, and no one will be able to take him down. But the
yeah,
disservice you do to that child is they're actually not being coached into playing football. They're
right,
just bigger than the rest of the kids,
yeah,
and they're actually not developing skills along the way. But it's interesting when you see an outlier like Brandon Jacobs, and even I guess Derrick Henry is kind of, but he's just not as
yeah,
like
100%.
big. He's
It still
tall, he's
is.
got
Yeah,
long arms, but Brandon Jacobs just looked like a boulder in a way, like he was just a
yeah,
very big force. Whereas that style of football kind of went away. Like no one really runs the ball as much as they used to. So you'll notice even like the size of the linebackers I've noticed have gotten a bit smaller. So it's
they have.
yeah,
Yes,
just because
yeah.
I
It
remember
used to
that.
be.
Go ahead.
It used to be like you look at guys like Kevin Green or shoot. there was a bunch of them
Well, I'll tell you
that were
one really
just.
big outlier. Levon Kirkland, he played for
Oh,
the
okay,
Steelers.
yes, perfect,
He was like
yes,
a center
massive,
playing
yeah,
playing linebacker, and not like a
massive,
lot like a stop the run linebacker. Like he was pretty light on his feet. He can drop
yeah.
back. Like it was he. There's out. It's interesting when you see outliers like that.
The game just it changes, and now like a lot of these edge guys are built like linebackers, and
Yes.
it's just most of the guys at the combine. Because I always watch the combine because I like to watch the see how these guys perform and see what I can kind of pick up. And a lot of the linebackers. I mean, I didn't hear a guy that was over 230,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that back then, when there was still running the ball a lot, like the middle linebackers were 250, 260.
Yeah.
And
It
I
just
played
showed the
I played
shift in
arena football, so
responsibilities.
yeah, exactly. And in arena football, you could see a fullback that was 300 pounds
Yeah.
and a Mac linebacker that was 270. That was, where the game used to be, and now it's just like completely changed.
Well, I remember even when I first started watching when I was younger, like nose tackles used to if you were below 320, you weren't a nose tackle. Like it's just
Right.
that's just the way it was because that was your job. But
Yep.
since we're on the topic of football, would you say that is the sport that almost the certain type of athletes could benefit the most from conjugate style training?
100%.
Yeah.
I feel like there there really just is not a there's other ways, right? We always talk about like what's maximal, what's optimal, and then like what's suboptimal, and we always
Yeah.
want to be optimal, right? And so I feel like the most optimal way to train because of what's needed for that sport, right? From conditioning to the sprinting to the power. It's because it's a power sport, right?
Yeah.
There's just if you look at all the variables, it's the way that it needs to be. Now, unfortunately, and I know that there might be a handful of strength conditioning coaches that use that system. But unfortunately, like everybody else has been grandfathered into CSCS and the linear block periodization
Yeah.
way of doing things. And it kind of blows my mind because I just don't understand how you can get away from one thing and lose that strength and then try and come back to it and then
Yeah.
lose the thing that you were just working on. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. And so everybody's been kind of like indoctrinated into using block periodization like Western block or linear periodization. And then when the reality is like you need to be working to bring everything up at the same time. And if you know how to do it the right way, you can really get awesome results. And I think that's why you don't see a lot of private sector facilities using anything but conjugate, right? And they get a ton of results, but no one in the strength conditioning world is utilizing conjugate because I think it's too much work for them to try and figure out everybody's weaknesses. And so that you have 80 or 90 kids, it's hard to say
Yeah.
like, okay, you quarterbacks, you're going to do a max effort, or the other thing is they just think it's too dangerous, but it's not. It's actually safer. Quarterbacks, you're going to do box squats. Linemen, you're going to do trap bar dead, whatever, right? Like it's a lot. So I think that's why they don't do it. But if you look at the private sectors, everybody's doing it from what I have seen for the most part, and it works. Like it just everything matches with football is such a ever changing sport,
Yes.
and there's specific needs, but those needs change, and it's like, did I just describe conjugate? Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's
So
true.
that's how I view it. And again, like it doesn't have to be. I think people see it as like, oh, well, you mean West Side conjugate? No,
No, it's a completely
it's
different
not what
thing.
I mean. It's a completely different thing. If you're just looking at just conjugate, where there's a rotation of movements to prevent wear and tear, and you're always working to bring up, and you're pulling the sled, and you're doing everything that's necessary to drive that person's weakness. I mean, it's night and day.
Yeah, how could it possibly be bad?
Right.
But you were talking when you talked about the quarterbacks like not bench pressing or just doing heavy lifting or whatever. It reminds me
Right.
of I can't remember the golfer's name, but he posted a video on his Instagram of him deadlifting, and it wasn't something super heavy. It's not like he was going for like a 405, 500 pound. I think it was just two plates and some change. And people were talking about other golfers or people in the golf space were talking about how that's going to affect his game and whatnot. And he said to people, he goes, "Listen, this sport that I do, a lot of torque on the back, a lot of stuff like that." He goes, "When I lift this way, it actually makes my back feel better and it helps me withstand the forces that I'm doing as I'm driving or hitting the ball." So I think that it's a big misconception that if you're doing a lift with a barbell like that, it must be dangerous. It's only dangerous if you're using too much weight for then what your body is physically prepared for.
Well, I think where a lot of people get messed up is that they tend to stay on only one end or the other of the force velocity curve, right? So it's like, okay, if you were a golfer and you just did only max effort and you didn't do your plyos and you didn't do your throws and you didn't do dynamic effort, you're not converting any of that absolute
Yes.
into power or RFD or whatever. So I think, but nobody knows that. That's the problem. Like people don't understand because they don't want to read or whatever, right? They don't want to do the research themselves. But ultimately, like if I would love to work with a golfer because if you increase their absolute strength and then using the dynamic effort method, however you want to use it to bring up their rate of force production, right? They're going to drive the ball further.
Yeah.
But what are they not going to do? They're not going to put on unusable mass. It's all about creating. Everyone thinks like, oh, I'm just going to do high reps, right? Cool. High reps aren't functional.
Yeah.
You'll gain muscle, but it's non-functional hypertrophy. Like that's a fact. So you would, but singles, doubles, and triples, you're not putting mass on with that. So you shouldn't affect a person's swing just by saying, oh, he's doing max effort. He was not going to be able to hit the ball as far because he's losing mobility. It's like, no, if you understand the system, we're bringing up all strengths at the same time. So in theory, if you're riding that curve properly, you should be able to strike the ball way farther, right? Like I'm not going to pick up the ball, and if I had the technique and the mobility, yeah, I would be a 350-yard driver because of the amount of strength and power I can produce. But because I lack the mobility and the technique to strike the ball properly, if I'm lucky enough to hit the ball good and straight, I'm going to get like a 250, 275 because I just don't have that's where you can get into this with track and sprinting too. It's a whole Pandora's box. The SPP for the sport has to still be there. Louis said that. Everyone else that followed after him said that too. If it's not there, then that's where people get it mixed up that, oh, conjugate's not good for sports. It's only good for geared lifters or whatever. It's like, dude, kiss my ass. Yeah. There's plenty of top level guys that have used that system. And Louis even got to the point where he was working with so many, it was too easy. Like guys were running faster and faster and faster. And he's like, you know what? This is too easy. It's not fun for me. I want a challenge. I want world records, right? So I think that's what people see. And then they think, well, this just isn't going to be appropriate for what it is I'm trying to do. And I'm like, you're crazy. My first experience with coaching was I was a couple years after I got done playing ball. I was around 27, 28. A really close buddy of mine from high school invited me out to the high school to help him work with the girls weightlifting team in Florida. And girls weightlifting team in Florida is a clean and jerk and a bench with a pause. So it's like a mix of both. And he was using more of like just a traditional Olympic weightlifting system. And I said, dude, let's try utilizing Conjugate. And I talked him into it. And back then you're talking about, oh God, 12, 14, 15 years ago, like I didn't know anywhere near as much as I know now. So it was still very basic templating, dynamic effort method, max effort, right? And we ended up with like 4 state champs.
Wow.
And multiple, like we won conference and district every single year, multiple state invitees. And Florida is sick when it comes to athletes. Like
Oh
you
yeah.
talk about strength, track, all that stuff. So there was no lack of competition, even with the girls. So what we did was we just rounded up the best female athletes, right? Lacrosse, softball, even cheerleading. Those they're great for Olympic sports. And we filled all the weight
Makes
classes,
sense.
and we just killed because that system worked so well. Because part of it was they were athletes, right? But the other part of it was like we weren't really we would practice the lifts. We weren't taking cleans to maxes or anything like that. We just got stronger in other areas, and that drove their lifts up,
Yeah.
right? And so that to me was, and that I did that for 3 or 4 years, and it was amazing to just like eye-opening work with girls and see how much better they could get year after year, even some of them cutting weight and doing different things. And so that kind of opened my eyes to like how beneficial the system was. And back then I was still a knucklehead when it came to like like I understood the system, max effort, dynamic effort. We did conditioning, we did sleds, all that stuff. But to the extent that I do now, it's night and day. So even more so now, I'm like, this system, like there isn't anybody that shouldn't or couldn't use it. It just has to be done appropriately for what their needs are.
Yeah, I think the main thing that people get it all misconstrued that it's only for geared lifters is they look how the geared power lifters are training, and then they train exactly like that. And then they wonder why it doesn't carry over to their raw powerlifting or to their athletics. And it's like, but if you look at the exercise selections that they are using, it's going to get you better at geared powerlifting. Like I remember the very first conjugate thing I ever saw was I can't remember what it was called. It was some post. It was, I think it was by Jim Wendler on what they used to do. And now, then a couple years later, when I look back at it, I'm like, but that seems very much like for what how people in bench shirts would bench, where it was just everything was triceps, there was little or no pec in and shoulder work, and it's like, but if that's not your main weakness, why would you just break your head into a wall over and over and over again? So it's like
Sure.
I feel like that's where, because a lot of people do actually say, why don't any top level powerlifters in like the USAPL or whatever the top federations are called, train in a conjugate style? I honestly don't know the answer to that, but to say it doesn't work for raw powerlifting would be a complete mistake, in my opinion. I just
Yeah.
think it wouldn't be implemented properly. That would be the better way to go about it. I know even I think his name is Burley Hawk. I've read some
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
on him, and he has a lot of good approaches when it comes to raw powerlifting. One thing that I thought was interesting, and it was very similar what you said about the every fourth week. He doesn't do like a 6 rep max or something. It'll be like a 5 rep max, a 1 rep max, 3 rep max. Then that fourth week is just like another speed day. So he'll do
Yeah.
like 8 sets of two on deadlifts or something like that.
The other one, I don't. It slipped my mind. The other one was using the Lighten method. So doing
Okay.
reverse band in that fourth week. That's typically so. This is just the way that I do it. What I will do is I'll go 3 weeks, and then I'll take, we'll call it a volume deload,
Okay.
where I will lower the sets and reps on the accessories, and then I will do just singles working up on a reverse band. Then I'll do another 3 weeks, and then I'll do almost like an intensity deload where it's going to be dumbbells or for like a high rep max or a wide grip 6 rep max or even a bamboo bar
Okay.
for a max, because you're just not going to be able to do anywhere
Yeah.
near, but you're still getting stimulated up here because I'm so type A that it's like it's hard for me to take deloads. I usually just I end up waiting until I feel too beat up, and then I'm like, oh god, I have to do it. But since I've done it that way, I haven't had to do like a traditional like lower everything at the same time. I'm able to kind of wave that stuff in and out. And that was another thing that I think Burley mentioned at one point or another, was that they'll use reverse band, and everybody thinks, oh, reverse band, it's only good for geared because it's only helping the lockout. And it's like most people that say that probably have never done reverse band. So if you I did my last reverse band, I got up to like a 515 or 520, and from here to here I felt every bit of that 520. It's a what do they call that? Louis talks about it in his book. It's an unforeseen virtual effect.
Okay.
With the reverse band, where even though it's should be taking a certain amount at the top, the heavier you go, the less it's actually taking because of gravity.
Yeah.
But what you're also enhancing is, again, it's just like regular bands. You're also enhancing the overspeed eccentric
Yes.
of the lift. So you're teaching yourself to really push through. And it's just another indicator lift. It's not a builder, right? We're using our accessories to build. It's almost more like a tester, but you could mix that in, and then I'll just kind of cycle through those on that fourth week. But I think the differentiating factor is, they've mentioned this before. Sometimes they'll do drop sets after the main movement as like a supplement. But if you really hit that, you can pick any, if it's for bench, any heavy extension is going to be a good supplement for bench when it comes to the triceps. I think whereas with the geared guys, their main supplement for bench was going to be like 5 board or 4 board. You're not going to see a ton of carryover to raw with a 4 or 5 board, simply because if you're constantly going here, by the time you bring that bar down here, it's going to feel like earth shattering on your chest. So I think that's where a lot of people kind of get things messed up, is they think, well, those guys did it that way, that's the only way to do it. It's like, no, it's not. That's the essence of Conjugate. Is like, if you look at what Louis did specifically, he literally just went and looked around and grabbed all of the things, right, and then brought it into his Westside Conjugate system and made that system that way.
Yeah.
Conjugate was always out there. It's all about rotating the movements and having the movements and the dynamic effort method, max effort method. But he went and took bits and pieces of what everyone else was doing and said, well, I'm going to use this here. And then he screwed around with it until it made sense.
Yeah.
And then that's the essence of the system. And I know you do the same thing, and I do the same thing. I'll draw upon, like, how do we know something works or doesn't work if we don't experiment with it?
Of course.
You can't see it as a complete waste of time, because at least it lets me know this thing worked, this thing didn't. I don't have to screw around with this anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. But even when you said like the 5 board, it's all about specificity at that point. Why are they using a 4 and a 5 board? Because in their bench, that is going to be the part where it's either they're going to get the lift or they're not. Like, why do they use so much band and chain at the top? Because it's the same thing. That's where no one, unless the weight's just too heavy, a geared bencher is not going to miss 2 inches off their chest, because that's where the shirt is helping them propel, right? So people see that and then put that into their own training and then wonder why it's not working. Well, you're not implementing the system correctly.
Exactly. I'll give you a great example. So I was noticing over time, I was kind of developing a stick point. And this is probably prior to when I was really using that repeated effort to failure for my triceps. But I was noticing, probably from just above mid-range to here is where I would stick when I got to that maximal. And everything's measured in time, right? So Louis would always say, like, you just didn't get it there fast enough, right? You can't bench 120%, but there's like a 5 to 10%, maybe a 3 to 5% give where your max is, where you maybe just didn't get it there fast enough. So I took that and said, okay, well, bands is going to be mostly here, right? So, because I'm thinking about, like, what can I do for my speed work to try and fix that issue? And so what I did was, traditionally, if you look at the way that chains are set up, most of the chains should be completely deloaded at the bottom. Yeah. And then as you go up, there's still a couple, because you don't want it to sway or whatever.
Yeah, like
so what
1, 2, 3 links.
Yes, I took the chains and I doubled them up so they were shorter. And
Yes.
if you look at like my recent videos from like Dynamic Effort, I have the links are shorter. So what it does is it completely deloads. But then I wanted the because it was right around 140 pounds of chains. I wanted that 70, 80, 90, 100 to hit right at that stick spot.
Okay,
So
I
I
gotcha.
adjusted the chains to where I'm still unloading and deloading, right? But it almost ended up, it's almost like the eccentric hooks where you kind of release
Yeah.
it and then you just fire up fast. Well, now I'm really having to speed through that third portion because that totality of the chains hits so hard as it comes off the floor right in that spot. So I had to mess around with a little bit, but I did a 3-week wave of that. And then I came back to some more traditional stuff and it was like just blowing through it because my body constantly got that stimulus in that spot. And it was still enough at the floor to where it was beneficial, but I was really hitting it hard. You can't do that with the bands because it's 50 here, it's
Because then they'll
100
be
here.
super loose. Like you need the band to have
Right,
some
exactly.
tension the whole way.
It won't work. You could if you had like a setup where you could do like double bands, like Elite makes that deadlift platform where there's like notches all the way
I've seen
down,
that. Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
having to pull through. That works. That makes sense. But it's hard to do that on
Not from a
bench. You have to
traditional
have
like band peg setup. No.
no. So I messed around with that with the chains, and it carried over quick. I mean, it was 3-week turnaround. So that's where a lot of people just aren't willing to take a chance because they feel like they're wasting time.
Yeah.
I know right away if I wasted my time with something because it hurts like hell. If I didn't do something right, or if it was just a complete waste of time, I'm a wash for the day, right? I'll
It's
finish
a good
with
way
some
of looking at
bodybuilding
it.
stuff and get out. Yeah, but you have to be willing to take some chances with different exercises for you to understand. And I feel like people maybe they just don't have the focus of or the understanding of like there has to be some experimenting because without experimentation there is no West Side, there is no Western conjugate
Yeah.
method. It's all Eastern,
Yeah. There
right?
is no anything
From
really when you
Bulgarians.
if you want to
Yeah.
expand it
So
into life, really. Like most good inventions came from experimentation, came from
right.
accidents, let's be honest. I always tell people like I love Reese peanut butter cups, and if someone didn't spill chocolate and peanut butter together, those don't exist, right? So it's all about
That's how aspartame got created.
okay.
Is the old sweetener? Some idiot accidentally licked a powdered version of motor oil or like a lubricant, and it tasted sweet, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna make aspartame." Yeah, that shit's nasty, but like that's my understanding is like it was all accidental. So
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to put in time. No one wants to take, like, I have set myself up for, I'm 42 now. Like, I want to hit 500 by the time I'm 45.
Okay.
It's
3 years.
not, it's, and that's 50, 60 pounds that I got to try and amass over in volume over 3 years, 3.5 years. So it's not, I'm going to hit 500 in 6 months. No,
That's probably
maybe
not
if you
happening.
like
Yeah.
yeah, like gear up and take Tren or something, but I'm not doing that. So you have to be realistic with what your expectations are at a given age. Now, these young kids, they can make fast gains. You're talking about 100 pounds in a year, right? But it's still a process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just one final question. You talked
sure.
about the conditioning aspect. What type of conditioning would you give to like let's say an average person or let's say a football player, some form of athlete? How does that differentiate?
So the average person, they're going to get most of their benefit from zone two. So like cardiac output method, okay? Steady state, lower intensity, 65, 75% of their heart rate for 30 to 45 minutes and cyclical. So we're not creating wear and tear.
Okay.
I will typically implement the cardiac output method once or twice during the week. And then with a lot of people, I'll do kind of like a pseudo conditioning, pseudo cardiac output where it's not really higher intensity, but we're moving with like kettlebells or rowing or ski erg or the air bike, something like that, at a little bit higher on the percent, like 75-80% compared to like 60-65%. Now with athletes and sledding, obviously, if they have access to a sled, like that's a great way. But with athletes, it's all about like what energy system are we, lactic, are we alactic, like what are we going at, what's the sport, what are we going after. I like Joel Jameson's book Ultimate Conditioning. Like that's a spot on. Like Jason Brown's stuff is really good when it comes to conditioning. I got a lot of my Gen Pop conditioning again because I've been doing all of this stuff for a very long time. I just never understood why. Like, why am I conditioning in between? So you're conditioning one because nobody needs to have extra body fat, right? You're conditioning number two because the higher your GPP is, the more likely you will be to recover better in between. And then number three, you're conditioning because the better your cardiac output, the more oxygen you bring in, the more the better your mitochondria function, which can actually make you stronger and build more muscle. So there's three like main components of why you would do something. Heart health is the given. I don't even have to mention that, but a lot of people just aren't on point there. So the minute that I put them on walks every day and then I put them on like 30 to 45 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week of zone 2 work, and just like Conjugate, I'm always rotating that. Every 3 weeks, I'll rotate that out. They will start to see a significant improvement in all areas. So it's kind of like a no-brainer with the system in terms of the results that I'm able to get. Like I've been so blessed that I've been able to help so many people that actually want to do the work. And so I get these great transformations, and conditioning is a very big component of that. It's always in there. It's just the amount is going to depend on what their goal is, where they are in the year. Now with sports, I think my experience was that you don't have to sprint to get faster, right? If you have the technical proficiency, because the more force you can produce, the more you can put into the ground, the faster your foot's going to come up. So on, simple stuff. My experience in the system was that initially your conditioning was, you're going to do for your accessories today after we squat, you're going to do glute ham raises, and then you're going to go right into Bulgarian split squats, and then you're going to go right into a reverse hyper. And there's no rest in between those. You're in shape in 2 weeks from that.
Yeah.
You're dead at first, but your GPP goes so high just from reducing your rest intervals that you're getting the benefit across the board. And the output is going to be there, especially with a reverse hyper, because you're not doing as much work as now the Bulgarians, like forget about it. Like that would make you want to puke doing that superset. But that's what my coach had me do. And then the sled work was always there. So that became, in essence, the zone 2 stuff, where go outside and pull the sled for a mile. Like it's it's very intensive. Your heart rate might not go red line, but you're going to get up there. And as you get in better shape, you can utilize it in a different fashion. So as I've progressed in my knowledge in the system, I've understood how to do like 30 seconds off, 30 seconds on method, 10 seconds all out, 50 seconds rest, what high intensity interval actually means, where it's max rest so you're completely recovered. That's where a lot of people get that mixed up. They think if HIIT is, I'm going to work at 85% full capacity with no rest, and like, no, that's just high intensity. The interval part of HIIT is the actual complete rest.
Yes.
That, if you could use that for fat burning in like 10-minute bouts, but that's the maximum amount you would want to do unless it had its own session. So I wouldn't pair that with a workout, like a strength workout or whatever. But really, it was back then, and we're talking 2005 to 2010, it was all about sleds. All about sleds and prowlers. maybe some med ball stuff. I didn't really start messing with kettlebells until the last like 3 years. And I'm
Same.
freaking obsessed with it now. Like kettlebells, after reading the special strengths book for like the fifth time, and as much as Louis talks about like the kettlebell stuff in there and how it enhances your grip and your mobility when you're doing different things, I'm not the guy that's going to sit there and stretch. So I need to find another way to kind of like kill two or three birds with one stone. Plus, like the core work that you get from it's ridiculous. Now I'm messing with the Bulgarian bags. We
Yep.
talked about that a little bit. There's just so many ways to skin the proverbial cat. It's just about understanding like what are the qualities and the energy systems that you're really trying to enhance, right? Most people probably don't need like the 1 to 2 minute anaerobic style training where it's more high intensity. Like I would say, Gen Pop, you hit zone 2 and then you throw in a little something that's fun here or there. Like if they like a CrossFit style WOD, like a Metcon for like 15 minutes, that's cool. Most people, it's always going to be cardiac output, zone 2, and then I'll mix in like some kettlebell stuff in there or something like that.
Okay, yeah. That all sounds similar to things that I would do. I like the sled, I like the prowler. Like you just said, I just got into kettlebells maybe the last 3, 4 years. I can't remember who I saw it from, but I didn't know kettlebells got that big. So I have I thought they stopped at like 100 pounds. Silly me, I know.
Yeah,
But I have one that's 123 pounds. I have one that's 176 now. And it's just, I was
that's
looking
beast.
online. There's some that are like, there's one company, I can't remember the company, but they make one that's like 400 pounds. It's like $2,000. But it's like,
Yeah,
I don't know who would ever need that. But it was just, kettlebells to me were always like a CrossFit thing, a swing, a thruster, a whatever. But then I was looking on Instagram and there's just like cleans and snatches and there's I can't remember what type of clean where it's like you transfer it from one hand to another as you
yeah,
swing it up and it's just a whole world, like even just doing front rack carries, just doing standard exercises like curls or triceps. It puts a different pressure on your body as opposed to a dumbbell. So there are some people that get too far into kettlebells and then they only use kettlebells, but
yeah,
it's nice to mix things around with them, especially for anything that you would do like a carry, like in this position, almost like a shrug. They're just very
yeah,
natural because the weight is very condensed and it's all
yeah.
underneath your arm, so it just feels a little bit different. But kettlebells are great for conditioning. I
And
100% agree.
it's so and this might just be me, but it's so primal. Like there's
Yep.
something primal about doing kettlebell cleans and kettlebell snatches and doing carries, like all the offset carries that you could
Yep.
do. Like it's so primal because it really draws on all these different axes in your body, and it's specifically for your core, that you can't really get with like even dumbbells. It's just not the same as kettlebells. So I get a ton of benefit from that. But like you can jump with them. You could do jump. There's just you're just creating more variances
Yes.
to kind of work through, which is to me is super beneficial. And the carries, I love the carries. Like I try to I try to hit some kind of core work, whether it be anti-rotation, anti-lateral flexion, whatever. I try to hit something every single day, because it's such a big muscle group,
Yeah.
and it recovers very easily, but it takes a lot of stimulus. And I think people miss on that your stomach is just another muscle and you have to train it as such. Like you could lose a ton of fat and still be like just flat looking because you haven't built those muscles. Whereas like, I'm trying to be a Ninja Turtle shell on my stomach. Like I want to be indestructible right there because it's just going to lead to a stronger core, more longevity, so on and so forth.
And also
So
it has
I
more,
just,
go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, go
It
ahead.
has more patterns it could do. Like think about your arm.
Yeah,
There's flexion, extension. That's about it, right? Whereas like if you just take that approach for your trunk and your midsection, you can do like a crunching movement, but then there's the anti-flexion movements, and then there's extension of your back, and then there's anti-extension. So to do all that into one session would take forever, and then you have to take time from something else. So the fact that you say you do something for that every single day makes perfect 100% sense, because you just
Yeah,
can't.
like you can you if you stack it, and I made a post about this the other day, like stack it in your conditioning. Why
Yep.
wouldn't you? I maintained through all my carries, right? So it's like they're not super my kettlebells are the pair that I have, one pair, and then I have one heavy one that's adjustable. They're 40 pounds. So if I rotate from front rack, single rack, offset, and then traditional after I've done my bike work or my vest work or whatever for 10 15 minutes at the end, I'm getting my core stability strengthening work, right? Anti-rotation, anti-flexion, all that stuff. But I'm keeping my heart rate right at 120. So I'm not getting out of the zone that it's overly stressful.
Yeah.
So it's still helping me recover, but I'm still getting that work at the same time. And I don't understand why, you can just go and do it like monotonous 45 minutes on the step mill and fine, right? But I'm going to get so much more bang for my buck if I add kettlebells to my conditioning, because then I can hit all of these different things that are just going to benefit me, and they're not really going to take anything away from my recoverability.
Yeah. It's
So
I do this exercise. I actually don't know what to call it. I saw a some wrestlers from Georgia, not United States, like up across the pond, Georgia.
yeah, yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like you start off with, let's say, a farmer's walk, and then you would take a step forward and you would clean one, kind of almost clean slash bicep curl, and then take a step
Hmm.
forward with the other one as you clean it. And I do feel a lot of stimulation in my forearms and my biceps, but just the fact that you're doing almost this, you're in the position where it's like one's racked and one is traditional, and then you're switching,
Yeah.
you do also feel it a lot in your core. And I just find sometimes with kettlebells, it's they lend more to, let's say, natural movement, as opposed, because if I were to do that, try to do that exact same exercise with dumbbells, it would just feel so awkward just because of how the weight is.
And it'd be painful too.
And it would be painful. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the other thing, and I think that's why one of the reasons why Louis mentioned it so much was it's very quasi isometric. So if you're holding here, like you're getting isometric contraction on your bicep,
Yeah.
your grip, your form, like there's always something quasi isometric going on with kettlebells. So there's just so many benefits
Yeah.
to it, and I feel weird saying this because 4 or 5 years ago we're like, that's just like CrossFit,
Yeah. Me
BS,
too.
whatever, and it's like, no, if you dude, I've picked up I've done kettlebell swings with a 200 pounder. I went to a gym in Austin. I think it was a Metroflex if I'm not mistaken, but they had a 200-pound kettlebell, and I got 5 swings, but my God, like
Just even the handle
incredible.
alone feels like it's about this
Yeah,
thick. Yeah.
yeah. So I think people really can miss on even like I don't know if I'm the creator of it, but I couldn't find it on YouTube. I did a you could call it a Tate's press or a Williams extension where
Yep.
you're almost like folding out. So I took the kettlebell and I held it here, and obviously it rests on your wrist, and then I would do high rep extensions with my 40s. Oh my God, that's staying in the rotation because that blew up my triceps.
Mm. Yeah, I
So
would
it's
imagine that
it's
would change like the orientation of how your wrist
It
would have to
does.
be, type of
Yeah,
thing.
it
Yeah.
does. So I think it hits more of the beneficial part to your for benching for your tricep, and then your what is that called? This is the Anconius, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Louis always talks about like that's a huge mover for
Yeah.
the bench too, is the Anconius that people miss a lot. I think it hits both of those pretty well,
I'll have to try that.
better than doing a dumbbell, which is just more like this, where it's like with the kettlebell, you're kind of gripped more out here, and you almost have to, it really causes you to really get more stretch here.
Yeah, no, I'll have to try that. That sounds interesting.
It's worth trying. I'll see if I can find the video. I'll
Okay.
send it to you.
Okay.
It might suck. I don't know, but I did it, and then I send it to another buddy of mine that runs a gym out in Colorado, and he's like, bro, those are legit.
Okay.
So
No, I'll give those a shot for sure.
if I can't find it on YouTube, that means it probably isn't out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's
Yeah.
all depends on what someone names it,
Yes.
right? Within the search thing.
Yeah.
But that's really all the questions I have. Do you have anything you want to plug, like your coaching or products you sell or anything like that?
I mean, I'm Justin dot Commodores dot coaching on Instagram. Um, I have a YouTube. I really use that mainly for just for publishing videos so that I can use it in the app for different exercises that I can't find on YouTube to use in my app.
Like an
That's
exercise library for your client type
yeah,
of thing?
yeah. Common Athlete Performance is the YouTube. Common Athlete is one word, so it's spelled Komon and then Athlete Performance. Um, and man, that's it. Really, just shout out to all the people that came before me. You know, Louis and Jason Brown and Matt Wenning, and even like my coach for a long time, John Davis. He's been instrumental in helping me with different things, and Jared Bidney and a lot of those guys. Like just me being able to look at what they're doing and then them being open to giving away the information. I think that's what the biggest thing with Louis, why he was so great and so popular, was what he did from 2005 to the day he died, which was if you call, he answers and he tells you exactly what you need to do. And I have tried to take that and say, you know what, like if people ask me questions, I had a kid over here in the neighborhood the other day. He saw me working out and he just started training, and his mom texted me and was like, hey, such and such, can he come over and you just kind of talk to him? Like, yes. I mean, we talked for 2 hours.
Well,
And I'm just like, I just want to help. You know what I mean? I just think that that's good to give as much information, because you're not going to find, but 5 to 8% of the population will have any understanding of what it is that we do. Most people see me walking with the vest and a sled and carrying kettlebells, and they're like, what the hell is this guy on? What is he training for? And I'm like, life. Like, I got kids. They need a superhero in their life. Like, that's me. And so I think that's, the more people would learn to like give, like that's what the people, we wouldn't be here. Think of all the businesses there are because of Louis Simmons. Like
yeah.
the millionaires because of Louis Simmons, right? This little redneck pipsqueak Yoda looking dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But he was able to take everything and make sense of it and then just give it away.
Yeah.
He never said no, right? So like, I just think that that's the coolest thing.
Yeah. You mentioned something at the beginning, and I was constantly looking for a reason to bring it up again. And it just never came until now. You're
Yeah.
talking about giving. Joe DeFranco, I remember I read an article from him. It had to be, it's easily over 10 years old, talking about how if you're in business, you shouldn't charge for every single little thing, because how he landed his biggest client was just from an article he wrote about band pull aparts. And Triple H, the wrestler,
Triple H, yeah.
started using them.
Yep.
And he just
Yep.
called the gym one day and someone said, hey, it's this guy named Paul. He wants to talk to you. And he's from WWE or whatever. And he said that's how he landed his biggest client, just simply from giving things away for free. And I feel like so many people are, my time is important. Yes, it is. But there's certain people, they're charging like $1,000 for like a 1 hour phone conversation. I understand once you're at that level, that's fine. But when you're starting off and just wanting to, let's say, pay it forward and give back, it's very important, because then you say there is no next this person and next that person. And what you said, like even just look at Rogue Fitness or any other company that's, I'll even just be specific, that sells a reverse hyper. They didn't come up with
Right.
that. Louis Simmons
Nope.
essentially invented that machine. And then there's so many other companies that were able to put their own little twist on it. So I guess there's no copyright infringement stuff. But
The
there are
roots of
so
that
many
tree are
companies.
so vast.
Yeah.
Like they just go on forever. Every single Titan Fitness, every single Sorinex, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They have all taken with the safety bar and all these different things.
Yes.
And Louis is the first person to say, I didn't, like one of his best quotes, it's the funniest one. He's like, I didn't invent toilet paper, but I'm smart enough to use it. Right? Like, duh. So like people ask me like, well, did you come up with all this stuff yourself? And it's like, no. But but I have a system that I use that's from other systems that I've used to kind of create what works well for the people that I work with. And I think that the giving aspect, like to kind of make sense out of that, is like, because there are like it's asinine. It drives me crazy. Like I was listening to a podcast and this guy sent in a message to oh god, I hate to even use the guy's name, but he let's just say he looks like Joe DeFranco and he's Italian. But he says, a guy messaged him, he's like, man, I would love to get in a workout with you. Like, could I just come and just train with you? And the guy's like, he's like, you can, but my agent won't let me do it for any less than $5,000 for an hour. And so I'm like, okay, like I get that everyone's time is, but if it's your workout, you're working out anyways, it's like, is it really going to hurt anything?
Yeah.
But I understand that aspect of it. Whereas like, I think people would say like, well, why don't you just write me a free program then? And here's the deal. If I had somebody that was like up my butt 24/7, asking questions all the time, and I was giving them the answers, but it just wasn't making sense to them, but I knew that they wanted it, you know what I mean? Like I would be open to, if I didn't know them like I try not to do that with like friends or family or whatever, but I would be open to helping them even more. And I've done that before because I know that they're going to make the most of it. Whereas the reason why people like that charge so much is because they know that 90% of people, if you give them something for free, there's going to be nothing done because they have no sweat or blood in the game. So I understand both sides of it, but when it comes to, if you're charging somebody to answer a question, that's crazy to me. Like that I just, there is a number of people, and everybody that I mentioned, maybe not winning, but I did a program from Matt back in the day, and it was like a 16-week program, and I told him, I'm like, just say I'm a football player. Like I wasn't playing football at the time, but I'm like, just say I'm a football player. I want you to write me a program. And it was 16 weeks and it was like $500, and he probably doesn't even remember it. But I took that as, wow, man, this guy's like high level. Even at that time, this was like 2015, 2016. And I'm like, that's not bad. Like I think that's, pretty awesome. But most of those guys, you can reach out to them and they will respond to you eventually. Even DeFranco, I sent him, I'm like, hey, you were talking about conditioning on one of your episodes, and I sent him a video of something that I tried where I was implementing like a quasi isometric curl into a carry, because he was talking about farmer's carries, and he's like, oh dude, this is awesome. Like, I'm definitely going to talk about this. I'm going to try it. Like, he had no problem responding. There wasn't like, well, if I charge you $1,000, then you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he responded. So to me, that was cool. Like, and I know if you saw those people in person, they would probably talk to you too. But a lot of these guys that really don't know shit, they're the ones that are charging uber amounts of money. And like, I get it, dude. I get it. You paid X amount of dollars for your master's and your doctorate, and I've been training since I was 12, so 30 years of experience, you could call it. Like, you can't really put a price on that, but man, you also can't put a price on, having a 18-year-old kid sit in your office and just be like blown away by like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Kid, he's done 4 sets of 8 on every single exercise, the same exact exercise for 1 entire year. Right. And he gained 20 pounds of muscle, but he's like, I'm starting to burn.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? And I'm like, here you go, here you go, here you go. Like, I don't charge by the hour here. So it's like, but I was happy to do that because I wish somebody would have done that for me.
Of course.
It's just how it is.
Yeah. All right. This pleasure talking with you. Don't worry about the spelling of your social medias. I'll have it all on the screen as it goes by, and I'll put them in the description. So everyone, this is Justin. You'll follow all his social medias. Like I just said, I'll have them on the screen. Check him out on Instagram. That's where I first found him. Check him out on YouTube. Like I said, links will be in the description. Like, share, subscribe this video. And as always, have yourselves a great day.